IU fans, IU fans, the news doesn't stop. All right. Like we typically do one episode per week. Okay. We typically, during the
Typically.
season, when games happen, we do one season a week. And you may have thought, I'm finally have heard enough from these knuckleheads now that the season's over. When here's the deal, folks. This is the more adventurous, entertaining, unpredictable time of the season. Okay? March Madness continues not with just the games that are being played, but with the news out of the transfer portal. And we heard two names make noise as far as the portal is concerned here on Wednesday in the morning. We heard Payton Sparks says yes to the Hoosiers and Mike Woodson, and Sparks will join this Indiana program with 2 years of eligibility remaining. And then in the evening, we heard Jordan Geronimo saying goodbye, putting his name in the transfer portal as verbal commits pointed out first, and then a slew of others came through and reported. So now all of a sudden, Indiana's front court is going to get renovated even further. We're going to talk about Sparks, what you should know about him, what impact this is going to make to the IU basketball program, discuss Jordan Geronimo's departure, and so much more here on episode 293 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, March 29th, 2023, where I am your host, Nithin Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, Payton Sparks, 6'9", 240-pound forward. It felt like the tea leaves were signaling something for about 3 years as far as Payton Sparks and Indiana were concerned. He officially committed to IU earlier today after 2 solid years at Ball State. If you were giving IU fans a scouting report of Payton Sparks, what should Hoosier Nation know about their newest team member?
Well, you have a high energy, 6'9" Indiana native big who at 6'9" moves very well for a guy that you said 240. He
Yep,
might be
exactly.
a little bit heavier than that. He might be 250,
I think you're
260.
right. I agree with you.
He basically moves like a defensive lineman, which is awesome. Now, that also means he comes with some restraints, right? Being that big,
Yeah.
He's not very nimble in the post.
Right.
He's not a guy that's gonna be a spot up shooter. Not gonna spread the floor. He's
Does it
sit
a
in the
little.
dunker's spot and wait for a alley oop.
He does shoot the J a little more than like Trace did. Obviously, that's a zero.
Okay, but
as
like
far as Jackson
that's
Davis.
uh,
But hey, look,
he's not
we're trying to
he's
be,
not a jump shooter, and he's not a guy you're going to want shooting jump shots, which is fine. Like not
yeah,
everybody
it's
has
fine.
to shoot jump
Right,
shots,
for
and
sure.
and to be honest, if let's say Woodson goes with a too big lineup next year with him and Renew, the good news is they're both on defense extremely flexible. And on offense, Renew should be able to spread the
Yeah.
floor. So it doesn't really matter. Like the floor spacing is going to be fine. And you add on the fact that the part that I haven't said that's the most important part of his game is that he's a guy that likes to attack the rim as a center. So when you, for instance, pick and roll with Xavier Johnson and him next year is going to be killer because you can't double Xavier. Like if the team hard hedges, Xavier's just giving that to Sparks, and Sparks is going to put that on somebody, yam it on somebody's head. Okay, literally. Like he's a guy that he goes full force. There are going to be multiple casualties in the Wisconsin game because they're going to try sliding in front of him, and all 280 pounds of him is going to smack into Brad Davidson 2.0. It's going to be like watching a Tonka truck get ran over by a Mack truck. Okay, that is what is going to be happening there. And I'm all for it. Like I think he's a fun player. Now, is he a starter on a Big Ten team quality?
Not now.
Not IU,
Not
not a
now.
winning team. The good news is he has 3 years left of eligibility, 2 years of eligibility left. So he might not be the starter this year. Hell, he might not even be the starter next year,
Maybe
given
not,
on
but
who's in the 5-star recruits that happen to be in the Indiana area and play for Indiana's Adidas AAU team. Just read in between the lines. There's some guys available at the 5 spot in the next coming class.
Plays at a high school that rhymes with Shoshomo.
Yes, Shoshimo, and first name sounds like Florida, but without the Ida.
Wow.
Anyways, you guys can go look that up on your own time. But basically, he's gonna be a guy that is just gonna be an absolute monster effort guy, right? And the good news is when we play somebody like Purdue,
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Edie cannot back him down. Okay, that will not happen. Edie could back Trace down because Trace was down 50 pounds,
physical,
40 pounds on Edie.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the same humans.
Nope.
And especially you give Payton Sparks in IU's weight room this summer. I am extremely excited to see what Cliff Marshall can do with him. Because he screams to me. He doesn't have the 40-inch vertical that Antonio Gates had, but he does scream to me as somebody that should have played football, is playing basketball, and you can use that to your advantage as a team, as just an absolute brute force. And so, again, he's going to be a guy, if he does start next year, that's awesome. If he doesn't start next year and he comes off the bench for Renew or for maybe, I don't know, Caden Cedric, that's, he's going to be a awesome piece to have. There's going to be some games where he's not going to be usable.
Sure.
Right. Against maybe some smaller teams that are running, for instance, against the Miamis of the world, I don't think he would play. I think you'd probably go Renew at the 5 and then 4 smaller guys to kind of match up and go matchup for matchup. So again, he'd probably be down the pecking order an extra spot. But against bigger teams, he will absolutely see the floor. He will absolutely be a menace. I think the only big red flag there is, and it's been pointed out in multiple places, so if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have already seen it. He shot 50% from the free throw line last year, which I know is, nuclear sirens to Indiana fans, but he did shoot 70% from the line his freshman year. So given the improvement we've seen across the board from IU's free throw shooting, I think he's probably going to be in the right place to kind of get that back on track. Because if he can get that back, it doesn't have to go back to 77% would be awesome, especially the amount of fouls that he draws per 40 minutes. But if he can get that closer to 60, 65, then he'll be absolutely playable and he'll probably earn a little bit more playing time.
Yeah, and this is why I'm really excited about this edition. I don't know if Payton Sparks is going to average 28 minutes like he did at Ball State over the course of 2 seasons. I would take the under. With that said, this is Mike Woodson not overreacting to the NCAA tournament and adjusting to what happened during Big Ten play. And during Big Ten play, which is 20 games long, not NCAA tournament, which is 1 or 2 or 3, right? For some teams it's 6. One day, guys. It's not overreacting to the NCAA tournament. In the Big Ten, whether you like it or not, you got to win games. And that means you got to have physical, tough, big bodies that can go up against whoever's Purdue's throwing out there, the Danger of Illinois, or the Rabrats of Iowa, or you run the list down, right? Wall and Crowell from Wisconsin. Again, I don't know off the top of my head which one of those guys are leaving and which ones are returning. Obviously, a lot of decisions need to be made, but those coaches are just going to recycle big, bulky forwards and centers into their starting lineup. And that's where Payton Sparks comes in, because he's someone who you can put on the court in a high-level power conference game for bench minutes and spot starter minutes if you have a player unavailable due to injury, and he can handle his own. And the other aspect of this that Mike Woodson is adjusting course to is that Indiana was completely dominated last year in Big Ten play when it came to rebounding and the foul margin. It was a joke. Indiana couldn't rebound, and Indiana was consistently trailing their opponent in the foul category. The other team was always in the bonus first. The other team was always in the double bonus first. And Payton Sparks is someone who rebounds and he knows how to draw fouls. And yeah, as Matt pointed out, the 53% last year is a little concerning. But even in the 15 to 20 minutes he's on the court, if at a bare minimum he's getting other teams to commit personals, potentially get into foul trouble, giving your team an advantage, that's exactly the kind of play, the angle that Mike Woodson is looking at here in addition to IU staff. Sparks hails from Winchester, Indiana, the east side of the state, almost right by the Ohio border. Not a school too many folks are familiar with. If you are well educated as far as IHSAA basketball is concerned, Sparks chose to go to Ball State after a number of mid-major teams offered him coming out of high school. He didn't have stars assigned to him coming out of his high school recruitment, but during that process, he did visit Assembly Hall in January of 2020 for Indiana's game against Maryland. That was the one where the Terps came back at the last minute and won. It's also the same afternoon that Kobe Bryant passed away. That was the day Jordan Sparks was in attendance at Assembly Hall at Indiana University. Sparks put his name in the portal after the 21-22 season. Indiana pursued him, but Sparks returned to Ball State, saying he wanted to go play for Ball State's new coach, former Indiana point guard Michael Lewis. Sparks put up another solid season in his sophomore year that just concluded. Got second team all MAC. Perfect, wonderful accomplishment given the competitive level of that MAC league. And then he put his name into the portal once again. And he identified in an interview with Inside the Hall that he wanted a power conference setting. He wanted a Power 5 setting, a high major setting. And that is what he got at Indiana, what he will get at Indiana, and what he could have gotten at a whole host of other schools. If you go look at the list of programs, we contacted Payton Sparks over the last couple of weeks, just to name a few. We're talking about Ohio State, Wisconsin, Arkansas, Iowa State, Oklahoma, all well-renowned programs with coaches that know what they're doing. They all wanted Payton Sparks in their program. Sparks chose Indiana over those and about, I would say, a dozen or 2 dozen other programs. And this is exactly where it's looking. Now, Sparks is going to come into an interesting situation here, right? There's no Trace Jackson Davis. There's no Race Thompson. There's going to be some opportunity available as far as this front court is concerned. We obviously saw Logan Duncan putting his name in the portal. We also saw Jordan Geronimo put his name in the portal earlier this evening. Talk to me a little bit about where you see Payton Sparks starting the season, Matt. Is it conceivable that he's in the starting lineup, or do you think Indiana will go out? You've heard the names that IU is linked to. Maybe those guys will start, and Sparks will be someone who comes in off the bench.
Again, he's gonna be a guy that comes off the bench, almost assuredly, especially his first year. I think Caden said Shedrick.
Yep.
I think I said Cedric earlier, which is not true, but Shedrick.
Okay. Yeah.
Which, by the way, according to our friend Evan Mia, he's the number 1 transfer in the portal.
Yep.
And that's a guy that I use heavily connected with. And I would absolutely love to see him in a Hoosier uniform. Really athletic. I said, I just said Payton Sparks was athletic. Shedrick is like NBA type athletic. He's a guy that hasn't really put it all together skill-wise. I think that happens to do with Virginia's system. They're just not good at developing bigs. It's just not something that Tony Bennett has particularly done well over his time.
You think about Kyle Guy, or you think about DeAndre Hunter. These aren't bigs. Mamadi Diakite, he wasn't a big by any means. Yeah,
No, I mean,
I agree with what you're saying there. Yeah,
yeah,
not by any means.
and yeah, Diakite. I mean, you could say Diakite, but even Diakite himself was still raw. Like
Yeah,
he
super
was still
raw.
just a super. He was just a super athlete. Like there wasn't a ton of skill in his game. I mean, he's not hitting hooks like Trace Jackson Davis, right? He's
Yes,
not
correct.
wiggling around. He's not passing the ball like Trace. This Shedrick's a kind of guy that can do a lot more on the basketball court than what he has done up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
Probably why he's transferring. And if you go and you look at what he should project to next year, right, with a summer of work, with the right coaching staff and whatever, I mean, he's a college basketball star in the making.
Yep. I agree.
I
Completely
don't
agree.
think he's a first option, by the way. He's not going to come in and be 20 points per game like Trace, but I think he can give you 70% of the rim protection that Trace did. I think he can give you 100% of the rebounding that Trace gave you. I think he can give you 20% of the playmaking. And I think he's probably a better fit in a Mike Woodson
And I
system.
think 100% of the block shots. If you watch this guy play, he can
Yeah,
protect the rim as good as anyone.
yeah, but the thing, Trace was such a special player because of his timing. He got up so fast, he didn't have to time blocking shots. He just kind of reacted to stuff, and it worked. That's why a lot of his blocks were damn near goaltends, right? Shedrick's not, he's an incredible leaper, but he doesn't have the same quick leaping ability that Trace does. I mean, there's almost nobody on the planet that does. Okay.
Yeah, great.
So that's a very special Trace. So he's not going to have the same sort of blocking ability, but I mean, he can have very.
I think it's in there. I think it's in there down the road. Maybe
And
not
yeah,
right
it's
away.
in there. You just have to unlock it again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not going to go out there and predict that he's going to do that next year. But what I'm saying is, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Nithin is correct here.
Yeah, and I will say this about Indiana going after Sparks, obviously landing his commitment and now going after Caden Shedrick from Virginia. Again, Jeff Rabjohns reported earlier here on Wednesday that Indiana is on a Zoom call at some point this evening, if not already concluded with Shedrick.
They already finished it, I believe.
You go.
12
there
minutes
you
ago.
Go. 12 minutes, yes, minute by minute updates. That's exactly what we're here for. Indiana fans will sit here and say, what are you guys doing? You know, guards and shooting and toughness. This is what we got to get after what we saw in the NCAA tournament. What is Mike Woodson thinking? What is Kenya Hunter doing? How is Yasir Roseman and Brian Walsh? How are they not screaming down the hallways saying, go get guards? Well, first of all, Indiana is pursuing guards in the portal. And second of all, you can't fill up all your roster spots immediately. Right now, the way it stands, Indiana will have, even after Payton Sparks' commitment, they'll have 4 spots open. If Xavier Johnson's appeal gets denied, they'll have 3 spots open if Xavier Johnson's appeal gets approved. This is as of Jordan Geronimo's transfer earlier this evening. So you're going to have openings on this team to fill. You can't do it right now because players can go through the portal process from now all the way through to May 11th. And what you're going to have is a number of players who go through the NBA draft evaluation process and they say, oh, shoot, not ready for the league. Maybe I'll go find a different program to play for. And you want to be able to capitalize on those guys, even if it takes you through the early part of May. Never mind trying to land a high school recruit who's still looking for a position, someone like Garway Dual, who we just saw decommit from Providence. I'm not sure if Indiana is going to be fully on board as far as those high school recruits are concerned. But you saw Woodson do this before with Tamar Bates 2 years ago, Malik Renew last year. We don't know what kind of changes will take place as far as the offseason carousel is concerned. So I love this mindset. I love this strategy. Indiana needs to add players they believe in, add players they have a connection with, add players that they can see make an impact to this program. I don't think Sparks will start right away. I see him as a bench piece in the early going with the potential to step into the starting lineup if someone gets injured, with the potential to go through Big Ten play and have stretches where he's a very effective role player. And that's exactly what you need in Big Ten play. In the NCAA tournament, the rotations get shorter. In conference plays, when you really need to get contributions from different guys as you go throughout the season. That's what you saw IU do this past year. To me, Matt, it's interesting. This tells me a little bit of a signal in that Indiana has had a connection with Payton Sparks for a while, right?
Mhm.
You saw them pursue him in the portal after last season, after the 21-22 season. You saw, of course, some mutual interest even during Sparks' high school recruitment, even so much as just having Sparks in the building, even if there was no real legitimate offer that was ever going to be handed out. Do you think it makes a difference? And do you think this is a signal for what's to come in the Mike Woodson era? That there is some history between the staff and the player. And even if they don't land the player immediately, hey, hello, this is someone that Indiana might pursue in the future.
Oh yeah, I think that's what smart programs do. You trust your connections. Um, and if you know anything about what has happened to me recently and what has happened to most people involved in college basketball, it's all about connections, baby. It's connections, connections, connections. Like
That's it.
again, I've started to blow up recently on Twitter because of Ant, right? And how'd I get Ants as a connection? Well, I played Among Us with him for an entire summer. So, it's the weirdest things that will get you connections. And again, last year, they didn't know if Trace was coming back. So they're looking at Sparks maybe to come in. Trace decides to come back. They go, Payton,
Be ready.
be ready. Yeah, like we will come knocking again. And we will still love to have you on this team. We just don't have a roster spot for you. And so he goes back and goes and proves another year at Ball State and gives it his all.
Yeah.
For the team that actually offered him and gave him a chance at college basketball.
Yep.
At the end of the year, he shakes their hand, says good luck, and moves on and goes to IU almost immediately. Right, that's somebody that again IU had a connection with. Shedrick,
Yep.
I believe, was it Roseman?
Yeah, he was here. I believe it was. I believe it was. Yeah.
Yeah, was his AAU coach, or worked with his AAU program. He's a guy that, again, at the time was an assistant coach, got hired, midway through his AAU, time at AAU in Georgia. And then, IU was kind of late to his recruitment, but I'm sure Coach Ya was texting him the last 2 years, basically being like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Just checking in. Watched your game last night on ESPN or whatever. Wishing you best of luck.
Yeah.
And it's those sort of little things that really help you in the transfer portal, because again, people are familiar with who you are and what you're about as a coach and as staff and a program, and it's a relationships based business, as I said, and this is a relationship based staff, and now it's a relationship based program, right? Which is not the worst thing in the world. Now,
no, not at all.
No, and it makes things easier, right? And so when people ask if Mike Woodson could recruit, I think the answer is not in a ordinary way, not in a way in which most fans would understand, which is he's not showing up at somebody's AAU game, and that's he's not John Calipari, right? Because John Calipari can show up anywhere and show up in an AAU game, and it's big news. Mike Woodson doesn't. He still will do that. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have the same effect. But when IU starts to reach out to you and starts to make a relationship with you, it's almost the same thing, right? Where it's like you want to have a relationship with Coach Woodson, regardless of whether you actually end up going to IU or not, because he's a good guy to talk to. I don't think people understand this from a neutral's perspective, but all of the guys talk to other coaches. I know Hunter Dickinson, for instance, Ant and I had him on earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He texts Izzo all the time. Like they text. And Izzo's, coaches at Michigan State, and Hunter goes to Michigan. So can you imagine Trace Jackson Davis coaching, texting Coach
I
Painter?
actually can. Yeah, I can.
And that probably happens too. Like they are, it's a relationship based business, but people are always looking for other perspectives on things. It just might not be from the sources that you expect the most, right? And so again, I really like this from IU, and I like the way they're building this program up.
Me too.
Because at the end of the day, they're gonna start getting some guys that people don't expect because they've built a relationship. IU goes and gets 2 guys from Montverde, right? Builds a relationship with Montverde. I would not be surprised to see another Montverde Eagle in an IU uniform
soon
in the near future.
Soon,
right?
Eyes emoji.
And it's not just that either. You have all the staff, where Kenya's worked, where Uzir Roseman has worked, where Brian Walsh has worked as an assistant, right? They're all reaching out to them. And it's not even just that either. We're going to talk about him in a minute, but, Trace could be reaching out to people for the program on behalf of the program, right? Caleb Love is a guy that's just 1 degree of separation from one of Trace's best friends, right? And Armando Baycott. Armando and Trace are famously good friends. And again, he's a guy that apparently has heavy interest in IU. Why? I would assume because 1, the staff reached out, but 2, I'm almost certain that Trace is back there pulling some strings, trying to help the program out still, because he's a Hoosier lifer, and of course, and probably love Trace. So love Trace. So I am pleasantly surprised with the direction that the program has been going with this, because I think in the 2023, in the modern age of recruiting, you have the transfer portal, and you have COVID years, and you have $1 million NIL checks. Yeah. Relationships are everything. And this is a program that is literally basing itself around relationships.
Yeah. And never mind the fact that, guess what, folks? I mean, the 5-star talent is not what's winning right now. If that was the case, you would see the teams in the top 4 of the recruiting rankings end up in the final 4 right now in March Madness. And that's just not happening, right? I mean, it's almost a complete direct opposite. It is Florida Atlantic, and it's San Diego State, and it's Miami. Now, UConn's got a great roster. They're the least surprising of the 4 Final Four teams.
By the way,
even that one is one that, go ahead. You're probably reading my mind here. Yeah,
I am. But the UConn roster can almost mirror what IU's roster could be next year, right? I said this last night. I'll say it again for those that are listening to us tonight without listening to last night's pod. If you listen to last night's pod, I apologize. You're going to hear the same spiel.
Still worth it.
But Sonogo, right, for UConn, is a guy that stayed in their program, and is a seasoned veteran, right? Mm-hmm. That would be what Xavier Johnson is, right? Yep. Second would be his 3rd year in the program now. Yep. Seasoned veteran, senior. You have Sonogo was a junior, but you get what I'm saying. 3rd year of the program. You have a 2nd year possible pro in Malik Renew as a guy that's been developing. And then you surround him with 3 transfers, and you bring in another transfer or 2 for the bench, and you bring in some freshmen that are a little bit promising that can give you some minutes.
Donovan Klingon.
And maybe a Caleb Banks here or there, and throw that all together into a dish. I'm not even talking about Trey Galloway. Throw it together a dish, and boom, you get something very akin to what UConn is. And UConn was dominating early in the year, had their lumps in December and January, right at the start of conference play, picked it back up in March. And in March, you need guards and you need experience. IU desperately lacks experience, right? And I think they can go get the guards. And I think they can go get a wing or 2 to partner with whoever they already have in the program. And I think next year could be really special for IU. They can build something really great. But again, you got to build it through the relationships, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that's the point, you had talked about earlier in this NIL world, in the transfer portal world. There is going to be a long list, 20, 25, 30 schools that contact each and every one of these quality players that throw their name in. And it's going to happen to the ones that exited Indiana's program recently. There are going to be a list of 20 schools that go after each of Tamar Bates and Jordan Geronimo and Logan Duncombe, right? And now with the shoe on the other foot, Indiana has that inner track for some of these players, and pay attention to the ones that Indiana keeps in touch with and the programs that Indiana keeps in touch with. They may not necessarily hit on a transfer this year, but it could be a signal for what you see next season or a couple years from now as Mike Woodson starts building these connections over the course of the rest of his career. Lots to talk about. Payton Sparks, looking forward to seeing him in an Indiana uniform. It felt like it was inevitable. It felt like this was going to happen at some point, either last year, this year, next year. Great to see Sparks come to Indiana again. It would have been tough to see him play for Wisconsin or Ohio State. So I'm happy we get to see Payton Sparks play for IU this upcoming season. We're going to keep rolling right along here, folks. If you would like to know more about Payton Sparks, we have an article just posted earlier today in the wake of Sparks' commitment. Make sure you head over to indianahq.com to check it all out. That's where you can find us anywhere: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosiers Sound. That's where we at. A reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, it's free. We don't make you pay a single penny, except we do require your time. All you have to do is search for the Hoosiers Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information once again by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. The other big news from earlier today came just through the presses right around this evening. Jordan Geronimo, after 3 years at Indiana, put his name into the transfer portal. 3 seasons that were a bit up or down. It was a lot of flash in the pan stuff. We remember Geronimo being a force against Luka Garza early in his career, helping Archie Miller in Indiana snag some unbelievable, unexpected victories over a really good Iowa team. And then last season, his second year, the 21-22 season, we remember his big flurry at the end, which came with big games against Wyoming, helping Indiana win his first NCAA tournament game in 5 years. And of course, that St. Mary's game that we all like to forget, Jordan Geronimo was actually pretty solid. We really have to find a silver lining from that St. Mary's game. Jordan Geronimo was pretty solid in that contest for IU. And then this year, he was a big spark for Indiana in January. When things were looking rough, he was able to step in with Race Thompson out. Geronimo stepped into the starting lineup and gave the Hoosiers some energy at the start of the games, even if he only averaged 12 minutes each contest. In that early January stretch, he played with that sort of MFer attitude, especially in those games against Illinois. I remember the Penn State game, even though Indiana lost early on, he was really banging at the door. The home game against Wisconsin, he was important in that one too. But 3 years, Matt, 3.8 points per game. He had some good moments, a lot of uneventful ones. What are your takeaways from Geronimo's decision to put his name in the portal? What will you remember from number 22?
I mean, Geronimo is one of the most interesting players that IU has had in the last 5 years, just from a potential standpoint. Again, he was a guy that I believe I remember talking about this when he first came in the program, but he was late to basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a late developer. I thought he didn't start playing varsity basketball until his sophomore year of high school, junior year of high school. He was a late bloomer. Yeah, he was a late bloomer. That's why he did have a ton of offers and was really far down on a lot of recruiting rankings, but was a guy with just pure raw talent, just wowed a lot of people. Again, the one thing he could do was jump, and jump he did. I think it's unfortunate because the right direction that IU's moving, he wasn't getting enough playing time. Straight up, I think he's good enough to play at the Big Ten level. I think he's good enough to start for IU, but maybe in a year's time, right? And I think for him, that timeline doesn't work, especially for a guy that wants to play in the NBA and chase his dream and see what he could possibly do with basketball in the future, right? Starting 1 year at Indiana is not going to cut that. It's not going to be enough, right? Regardless of, well, I mean, not regardless of how he plays, but basically assuming that he plays, decently well. It still wouldn't be enough, right? So again, he needs starting time. And I do believe he will end up finding a place on a Power Five roster. I've seen a lot of slightly misinformed people say, and I don't mean this, in a mean way, misinformed in a mean way, but just misinformed, saying that, he's going to go down to like, Conference USA, which by the way, might sweep championships this year, but
you're right.
Conference USA or the MAC or whatever. And I'll tell you this: if Geronimo does transfer, I'll tell you the one school to look out for him, and I think I've said it before on the podcast, is Providence. New coach, a lot of the rosters transferred, and it's close to home, right? Because he went to school in New Hampshire. So that is something that I would definitely look out for Geronimo.
Can I send a shiver down your spine?
Sure.
For this, you're saying Providence. The one school I could see jumping to the phone right now to contact him is old Rutgers. I could see old Rutgers.
You actually gave me a shiver. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds terrifying.
Steve Peichel, right, getting his hands on a guy, and of course that 2 times a year that Indiana's going to get Rutgers twice. You just know it. Jordan Geronimo fired up to play that game. Just thinking about this as we were preparing, because again, I don't think Jordan Geronimo and Indiana are leaving with a burnt bridge or anything like that. But I agree with you completely. I don't see this resulting in Geronimo ending at a mid-major school. I see this ending with him in a Big Ten, Big East, ACC type of program, and trying to prove people that he can play 28 minutes a game, put up double doubles, and stretch the floor, hit the three, become a force on the defensive end, really exhibiting his full arsenal, which we know is in there. It's just that Indiana, with the last 3 seasons, he was always stuck behind Trace and Race. And now with this upcoming year, it's going to be Malik Renew, and it's going to be Payton Sparks, and it's going to be likely one, if not maybe even 2 others joining the front court as well. That's what we're going to remember for Jordan Geronimo. Now, it's interesting, with Geronimo's departure, this unquestionably clears the runway for Malik Renew season.
Yep.
And I mean, this is going to be, we'll obviously go into this more as the off season goes on and as the regular season goes on, Matt, but I need folks to understand the Malik Renew you saw last year is going to be day and night different from the one you're going to see this upcoming season. You're going to see a player in the starting lineup every single game. You're going to see a player get, I would say, at least 30 minutes every single game. You're going to see a player that has, I would say, a decrease in his field goal percentage because he's going to take a crap ton more shots. And he's going to arguably be one of these players that goes for 16 points and 8 rebounds per game, which is something that if you looked at Renew last season, you'd go, that's crazy. But I don't think I'm giving Renew unreasonable expectations here, Matt. Is that how you see Renew coming up here this upcoming year? 30 minutes, 16 points, 8 rebounds. If that's crazy, let me know.
I think 16 points is a lot of points. And I think 16 points is especially a lot of points when you're adding in a bunch of guys that are going to score.
Got it. So maybe a little.
I think 12 and 6.
Okay.
I think 12 and 6 is reasonable. In fact, I think 12 and 6 should be the minimum for him. I think that's the kind of player he is. And if let's say he doesn't even get 12, let's say he gets 10. That passing that Trace was doing last year out of the post, he can do that as well.
Hope you were paying attention, Malik.
Malik's absolutely one of those guys that I can see just shooting up draft boards. Which, by the way, this freshman class that is coming in is possibly the worst class I have ever seen since I've been alive. Basically, the freshman class, the high end talent in this class, is a joke. So there's a lot of guys who are freshmen this year that aren't going to go in this loaded draft class. That's deep, by the way. I think
Yep.
that, a guy like who's the sophomore guard on UConn whose name I was currently
Jordan Hawkins.
Jordan Hawkins. Yeah, Jordan Hawkins is a guy that's getting looks at for possibly going lottery. I mean, he'd be an instant top 10 pick in any other draft instantly, just for the tournament he's had, and NBA execs
Well, does
love it when you show
this?
up in
Do you
big
think
time
that
games.
influences Jalen Hood-Schifino's decision, Matt?
That's yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that. Look, it could influence Jordan's decision, and to be honest, it could influence Trace Jackson Davis's as well, right? But yeah, Trace can return, guys. Surprise. He hasn't, obviously everything he said is that
Right.
he won't return, right?
Which again, that's what I would say for Trace. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is having some serious conversation.
I think he should, and I think it would be dumb to not have a serious conversation,
right?
Especially regarding this. Like, it would be negligent at best, to not have a conversation about this, because again, I'm hearing whispers that if Trace were to return, he'd be getting like $4.8 million in NIL.
That sentence doesn't make sense to me. I can't.
No, I know it doesn't make any sense to anybody. But 4.8 million. I mean, I gotta think that Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably making a quarter, half of that, and that's over a milli, right? And that's just off of estimates alone. That's not actually what they could be getting. They could be getting more than that, right? So,
well, what I would expect for Hood-Schifino here is the obvious next step of declaring for the draft while retaining eligibility. That's what I would expect. I would be surprised if he went that extra step.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he just straight up
gave
up his eligibility,
withdraws eligibility for the NCAA, hires the agent, and really goes through that full process. What I would expect
if he comes back next year, by the way, I'm gonna.
Well, and this is where we have to pay attention to Indiana's transfer portal strategy, right? That's going to be the signal here. If Indiana right now abandons the pursuit of guards, that'll tell us something. But right now, Indiana's still talking to players from the backcourt, and a lot of them. So that's a sign right now of where the coaching staff is. Again, these are all introductory, sort of exploratory conversations. We do see the report about Indiana showing interest in Caleb Love, the mutual interest there. Of course, Mike Woodson and Nico Timberlake have had an in-house visit. So we're seeing these wheels in motion, but a lot that'll change on a day-to-day basis, a lot of fluctuation on a day-to-day basis. And that's why this time of year, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it's fun to watch, and it's fun to pay attention to. So we're going to pay attention to Jordan Geronimo here. I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes. Again, if you have a gun to my head, I would say Power 5 school. I would say high major role. And again, our spine shivering prediction is Rutgers. Our less annoying prediction is Geronimo ending up at Providence with Kim English, the new coach there. That makes a lot of sense without looking into it too much, just as far as a program maybe where they have a new coach, they're trying to implement a new system. Geronimo can come in there and bring that energy, bring that passion, take a leadership role. I'm sure that's something he would embrace. The final question, as far as our transfer discussion, just with Sparks and Geronimo at least, Matt, I'm curious to hear from you. I don't think anyone was shocked, stunned, blown away, jaw dropped that any of the three players that put their name in the transfer portal from Indiana did so, with Bates, Geronimo, and Duncombe.
Mm-hmm.
The question to you, Matt, now, from here on out, do you think anyone else on Indiana's roster will consider, again, you don't have to make bold declarations here, but will consider or have the conversations to transfer out of the program this offseason?
I'm going to try to go through the list of names in my head that could do this, but won't. I mean, Leal won't.
Okay.
I think he's in a cushy spot. The only way he would look for it is if he wanted playing time. And I think he's making so much money as a realtor, I don't think it really matters.
Galloway, let's start with him.
Galloway will not be transferring. I think he's, again, a centerpiece of the program at this point. Whether people like it or not, Trey Galloway is a really really important piece for Indiana
Oh yeah,
next
and
year
I
and the
right
year
as of
after.
today, I would say Galloway's in the starting lineup. But as of today,
I would say he's either in the starting lineup or he's six man,
critical
and
six man too. Yeah,
he's a six man in a team that can play either small or big. So at times you'll probably start and play starter minutes. So again, he's a guy that is going to be instrumental to Indiana being able to play 3 guard lineups and then play 2 guards with 2 forwards and a big, and then playing possibly 2 bigs with a forward and 2 guards, or maybe 2 bigs and 3 guards.
right.
There's gonna be like a lot of lineups they're gonna
he's
get,
flexible,
and he fits
versatile.
in like 4 of
Yeah.
the 4 of the 5 possible scenarios. The only one he doesn't fit in is if IU gets Xavier Johnson, and let's say they get Caleb Love, and let's say they get Jamison
or who's not, yeah,
Timberlake or Jamison Battle, and then they get Renew and then Sparks.
Right.
He's not fitting in that lineup. But because again, Jamison Battle will probably start over him, but he would be the first guy off the bench. So either playing the 2 or the 3 in that lineup. So he's a guy that he's not going anywhere. So don't even expect him to put his name in the portal. Plus, I see him playing pickleball with Miller Kopp in IU jerseys. He's not leaving.
Just to be abundantly clear, no transfer expectations for Trace or Jalen, right?
No,
No shot. It's either NBA or Indiana.
It's
and
either
almost
NBA or
definitely
comeback. And I really haven't seen people discuss the Trace coming back. So some people might be taken aback from that.
I'm just,
I would say,
I would be shocked,
It's
Matt.
a 1% chance.
Yeah.
I would be shocked, but the opportunity does exist, and I've heard some whispers
Sure.
through the grapevine. That's for my podcast listeners that I've listened this far. Props to you guys.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I've heard some whispers of the grapevine that it's not as set in stone that he is going to leave as some people, or he himself again, has alluded to.
We're saying 0%, right? That's
people have said 0%. He has alluded to he's not coming back. I would tell you it's probably 20-80
that would break the
he comes back for like 20%.
10 minutes. That would break the internet.
Some people would be really mad, and all those people would be Purdue fans.
Okay, so we talked about Leal. How about Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn?
Caleb Banks, no. Especially he was the one freshman outside of the 2 really highly rated guys that
I am more excited to see Caleb Banks than I think anyone else on this planet next year. I think even more excited than Mrs. Banks. Frankly, sorry.
I don't think that's possible.
Sorry to his mother. Sorry, but I just have to say, Caleb Banks. I am so pumped. I want so badly to see that guy succeed at Indiana. I get fired up every time I watch him play.
Look, if Indiana stops looking at 3s, right, and is only looking at 4s and guards,
that's a tell.
It's him and Trey Galloway.
Yep.
And that's all you got to tell. That's all you know.
Either as a 3 or in this transfer conversation.
I will tell you, no, I would not. If I was him, I would not be surprised if I was not contacting other coaches to see what availability there might be for him in the transfer portal. Because again, you have 2 guards coming in next year that are freshmen. You already have IU looking at other guards for next year. It's going to be a pretty crowded backcourt in 2024 still. I would be surprised if he decided to. However, knowing his dad and his family, who are big IU fans, and knowing CJ and reading about who he is as a person, and he's a fighter, he's not leaving. I would be extremely surprised. I would not be shocked.
So to me, it would be a case of Indiana brings in 2 players who can play his position that are multi-year prospects, not just 1-year players. And then I think the talk begins. Right now, though, I do not think CJ Gunn is having these
Yeah, I
conversations.
agree. That's the perfect way of summarizing it. I
That's
think
just the way I see
his
it. I'm
position
speculating, but
in the future is not in jeopardy. Again, he will be a sophomore next year, so we'll only have 2 more eligibility after next year. I think he'll probably still get playing time next year. So I don't. He's a guy that again I think comes off the bench. I think the person who's on the outside looking in right now is Ja'Kai Newton as far as the whole
those are the
guard
last two
skill.
players. Actually, everyone who's returning who hasn't transferred or who isn't Trace and Jalen has been mentioned. So the only 2 other pieces are Ja'Kai Newton and Gabe Cubs.
Gabe Cuff is going to play because he's a point guard. Straight up. Even if we get Caleb Love, who can play point, he's going to play. Mm-hmm. I would say this, though. I love Ja'Kai Newton, and I'm a big fan of Ja'Kai Newton, but just from a minutes perspective and the players you're looking for and what IU is trying to build for next year, he is not a part of the absolute immediate first year plans.
Term, right.
And that's okay. Honestly, it would shock me if he was getting major minutes next year, especially since he's coming off a year where he barely played basketball due to an injury. So he's got a lot to work back into. It would shock me if he was playing major minutes next year, but I have been a very adamant supporter.
Me too. Well, I remember when he committed, you said this is a guy who could eventually see himself in the NBA.
And I'm telling you, I still stand by that.
I still don't disagree with you. Exactly.
I still stand by that, given his wingspan and his athleticism, and he's honestly very skilled for his age. It's just he didn't play a lot of basketball this year.
Get him in the program, get him developed.
Get him in the program, develop him, get him healthy, get him working with the weight training staff so that he doesn't get the same injury problems he had last year. Yes, please, but he's not going to be an immediate help, I don't think. So I've seen a lot of people being like, "Oh, we're bringing in 2 freshman guards. Like we could play the 2 freshman guards." It's like, I want what you're smoking, because they're not ready and prepared. And I think there's a lot of people surrounding the program that have their heads screwed on straight. Right, they're going. Those guys.
It's been a while, Matt.
It's been a while, yeah. But I think they're actually pursuing experience, which is what you need in 2023 college basketball. I'm sorry, the era of 5 stars alone winning you championships is non-existent. Okay, it just doesn't work anymore. It's not a thing. It hasn't been a thing since Duke last won its title. It stopped being a thing. Number 1 team in the country this year was Alabama, and they were relying on one and dones, and they were out by the Sweet 16. It's not a thing. It's not a thing anymore. Now, you can add 5-star recruits. It's not me saying that, Jalen Harrelson and Trent Sisley in the 2025 class, F them. We don't need them. Right? That's not what I'm saying.
Flory.
I'm saying, right. Huh? I'm saying that a guy like James Hood-Schifino can be on a championship winning team. He just can't be the star of that team. Right. He's got to be the third or fourth option on that team as a 5-star. And
which he would have been if Jalen Hood-Schifino would have been the third or fourth option.
Exactly.
If Xavier Johnson was healthy and if Bryce Thompson had been there all season, then we would be having, or Tamar Bates would have been showing that improvement from the end of last year, but it didn't happen.
And that whole thing is why I'm so certain that the staff knows what the hell they're doing. Okay, they just do.
Me too.
They know what they're doing. They built a roster that was viable. And Ant and I talk about the serious and not serious list. We're going to come out. There's going to be a whole podcast I'm going to do on the Big Ten Coast to Coast about the serious and not serious rosters. When the Big Ten finishes their rosters, it's going to be a lit episode. But IU had a serious roster last year. It was serious. It was a serious championship contender. Now, the only non-serious thing about that roster was that we decided to go into the season with only having 1 true point guard on the roster.
I know.
Xavier Johnson comes back. That is no longer the case. That is no longer the case. And you go get some dudes in the transfer portal. And all of a sudden, IU will have a very serious roster to contend for not just a Big Ten championship, but possibly a national championship, and getting back to a
Well,
Final Four and cementing IU as the team that doesn't choke from the state of Indiana, from the
well,
Big Ten.
and this is the thing, right? And again, contending for a national championship is not that bold of a proclamation as others may make it out to be, right? Like if you're a top 35 team in college basketball, you're in the
Yes.
mix. You're in the mix. You know, I think the days of John Calipari super teams are done. Mike Krzyzewski super teams are done. Part of it is because Krzyzewski no longer coaches. Even North Carolina in the end of the Roy Williams era had some real powerhouse teams. Of course, we remember those, but come on, you know, nowadays with NIL, transfer portal all in place, you just got to be playing well at the end of the season, and you got to have confidence, and you got to have a clear idea of who your dudes are, and roll the ball out on the floor and let's go. And that's exactly why you see the Final Four that you're seeing today. Plenty. We're going to wrap up here in just a moment. There's been some breaking news here as far as the transfer portal is concerned. Nothing too dramatic, but it is news that came through over the last few minutes. We'll talk about that in just a minute and wrap up.
Huh?
Again, just talking about who we are, folks. If you haven't paid attention, here we are the Hoosier Sound. We've done this now for a bunch of years. We're going to continue being your one-stop shop for Indiana sports until the end of time. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at Indiana HQ. Matt, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.hq.
Here we go. So it's no commitment. It's nothing big. It's just someone's going to visit Indiana here in the near future, which wasn't known up until a few minutes ago. That's where you can find us, folks. Join the masses. We see all of you who are paying attention and listening and watching our podcast. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. We really appreciate your support. The news that we were just talking about was reported by Jeff Rabjohns, who you need to follow if you're not following already. Jeff Rabjohns, his last name is Rabjohns. Super nice guy. We had a conversation in Albany, even dating back to last year in Minnesota. He has no reason to be talking to people who barely have an idea of what they're doing as far as when they cover Indiana basketball. But Rabjohns, he knows, gets out of his way to make you feel welcome. If you don't follow him yet, make sure you do so, because he just came through with some news that Indiana and Harvard transfer Chris Ledlum have arranged for a visit, an on-campus visit, where Ledlum will visit Bloomington in the days to come. Mike Woodson and the staff had an in-home visit with Ledlum on Sunday. Ledlum will now visit Bloomington coming up. 18 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. 8 rebounds per game. A player who's, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, a bit of a jack of all trades, right? Do you see Ledlum fitting in on this roster if this thing continues to pick up steam?
Yes and no. He's very interesting to me because at 6'6", you want him to play the 3, but he's more of a 4, which is fine.
Right.
But this is telling me that the staff is leaning more towards running Malik Renew at the 5, Payton Sparks coming off the bench, and putting Chris Ledlum at the 4 of the starting lineup, which means Trey Galloway at the 3, and then a guard, and then another guard. Preferably Xavier Johnson, right?
Yes.
And going with a little bit of a smaller lineup, with your tallest guy being 6'9" Malik Renew, and then your second biggest guy being 6'6" Chris Ledlum. But Chris Ledlum can do a lot with the ball. I mean, if you look at his stats alone, you might go, oh, scary, 29% three-point shooter. Well, I wouldn't worry about that. He's got a 47% total field goal percentage. He's got many different ways to get the ball in the hoop, including, I think he's got a mean mid-range game.
Really, and as the resident Ivy League expert here, I can tell you that everyone had him as the focal point of the game plan when they went and they played Harvard, right? Correct. And you're talking about even a team like Princeton that made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. They are all owning in on Ledlum when they work on their game plans. Now he's going to be one of, right, a number of weapons on the IU offense.
Yeah, and we've seen guys go from the Ivy League and be successful other places, and hell, Princeton made it to Sweet 16.
Yeah.
There's some good guys in the Ivy playing basketball. Chris happened to be one of them. I would love him on this IU team. I think it's a little bit different direction than what I thought what they were going with, again, because I thought they'd go after Shedrick, so then you probably play Malik Renew at the 4. But they could end up doing that and then bring in Ledlum, and then you have one spot remaining, and then you go get another guard, and then you run with
right after that,
Ledlum off the bench possibly, and Malik Renew starting, and then trying to fit in Ledlum at the 3 at times. There's a whole lot going on. It's all flying. We're all flying by the seat of our pants here. Okay, so
1000%. And the truth of the matter here,
what is happening here is amazing. I love it. This is fun.
This is great. Again, as we said at the start here, this stuff changes on a minute by minute basis. We had a podcast on Tuesday night, and half of it is probably obsolete. Half of it is not. So make sure you listen. All I'm saying is, as far as Ledlum is concerned, you have to keep pushing. You have to keep pushing. It's almost like you're overbooking flights here. You have to go to the next step with 10 of these guys, and you have to go to the additional step with 5 of these guys, and then you have to offer 3 or 4 of these guys, and then you're hoping that 1 or 2 of them says yes. Right. And that's where, because when you look at Ledlum's list of schools, you're talking about Kentucky, UCLA, Ohio State, Maryland, LSU, Arkansas, Xavier, Vanderbilt, Butler, right? These are a lot of schools here. Maryland, Virginia, Pitt. I don't know if I even mentioned them twice, but all I'm saying is, like, there are 24 schools that are going after this player. So you want to keep pushing, and then ultimately the ball will be in Ledlum's court to make a decision. So that's the news that came through here just a couple minutes ago. Indiana will host Chris Ledlum for a Bloomington visit over the course of the next few days. Of course, we'll see what happens to Cade and Shedrick and beyond. Caleb Love, of course, mutual interest has been reported between Indiana and the former North Carolina guard. So there's a lot to digest. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll come on to this podcast again Thursday or Friday, and there'll be more news, and there'll be all sorts of partying and festivities going on. Indiana, though, Matt, saw Payton Sparks come to this Hoosier program. They saw Jordan Geronimo put his name in the portal. So again, a lot of news as far as circulating around which players Indiana's interested in. As we wind down here on this Wednesday night, what are your final thoughts as Indiana keeps pushing here in the transfer portal?
The transfer portal is never going to stop.
It's great.
The grind just does not stop. It is awesome. I love it a lot. I've seen a lot of people naysay the Caleb Love news that there's heavy interest between both parties. I would tell you that, again, I said this on the last podcast, but I'll say it again tonight. I would love to see Woody with a guy that's not afraid to shoot the ball, with no conscience. Because, again, he's taking guys like that, Emmanuel Quickly, and turned them into really good players really fast. And there'll probably be some growing pains or whatever if Love decides to come to Bloomington. But I think the growing pains will be worth it, because then you'll have 2 championship level guards in your backcourt, which you go and look at a team like Miami. That's really all they needed, right? And then I think that IU's team next year would have 2 caliber guards, the same caliber of, or similar to, Wong and Nigel Pack that we saw in Miami.
Sure.
But the rest of the team for IU would be better, in my opinion. Let's say you go get Ledlum. Let's say you start Malik Renew at the 5, and then you bring in Trey Galloway. That team is immediately better than Miami. In fact, IU's team could probably play 5 out with that lineup, right? And that would be almost a completely new concept to Indiana basketball, right? And we haven't played 5 out since
whiplash.
We haven't played 5 out since Thomas Bryant was in the program. Okay,
that was like year 2 of Thomas Bryant. Also, it developed. Yeah.
So again, I would love to see Indiana do that, because I can just imagine a 5 out look, and then you have Xavier Johnson just going Sonic the Hedgehog mode into the lane. Because there's nobody to keep up with him speed wise, and then all of a sudden, you just open 3-point shooters, open cuts, open everything. So Offense is not going to be the problem with next year's team. Defensively, there's a lot of things that worry me about next year's team, especially just losing Trace, right? I mean, you'll probably replace Jalen Hood-Schifino with a better defensive guard because as good as Jalen was defensively, he was pretty mid, but that's to be expected of a freshman. But yeah, I am looking forward to next year's team. I think with every little piece of news that comes out, I'm more and more excited.
Same.
I wish the guys that have transferred the best. I don't expect to hear another transfer. I think these were the three transfers.
Three
that
with Duncan. Yeah.
Three with Duncan. I forgot about Duncan. The three transfers that everybody expected. I think this was just, again, if you were kind of ears to the ground with the program, this news was not. This wasn't news. This wasn't news during the NCAA tournament. Okay, this was not news like 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago feels like an eternity. It feels like 3 months ago at this point. So, we'll be making more of these podcasts as the news breaks for stuff. You know, hell, the way things are going, Chris Ledlam could commit tomorrow, and then all of a sudden we're doing another podcast. But we'll be here for you.
Yeah, we absolutely will. For me, the story here is it'll be an interesting storyline to keep an eye on. What type of players Tamar Bates, Jordan Geronimo, and Logan Duncan turn into? Right, I think it's going to be interesting. This was a major part of Archie Miller's downfall a few years ago because what happened was Justin Smith, after spending 3 years in the program, went to a more successful program at the time and was more productive.
He was really good for Arkansas.
He was, Arkansas
was
I'm not just saying than Indiana. Hey, Arkansas swept Indiana in the home and home. Justin Smith left Indiana to go there and was better.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he was good there because I got, ratioed by him on Twitter a couple of months ago.
Worth it.
That was really funny. Shout out Justin. But no, seriously, he got so much better in that 1 year in Arkansas. Did an amazing job with him.
He got a summer league invite. I mean, we're talking about next level stuff with Justin Smith. And again, I don't think this is as tenuous of a set of circumstances at Indiana, but this you're starting now to get more data points with Mike Woodson as a college basketball coach, and you just got to pay attention to this stuff, right? What happens if any of these players goes to freaking Duke and becomes a key contributor for Duke, right? Like that's going to be very surprising. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. I honestly could not predict, even if I tried, what Tamar Bates, Jordan Geronimo, and Logan Duncan will turn into.
Yeah.
But it's just something that's crossed my mind here. And it's something that I will be paying close attention to over the next couple of years. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 293rd episode of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today and yesterday, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.